Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Thanks to my friends at Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. A happy Tuesday to you all. I've been advertising on my social media that we're doing a triple header Tuesday. Thought we'd finish up my last month, I think, without baseball. I hope my last month without baseball, with three guests today. With the theme, which I think is important for these last few months and always, of giving. And so I have three guests that are extremely successful because of the giving and the gratitude and what they do in three different fields. So my guest today specializes in this. And then at noon, I've got a pastor from a local church who will absolutely move you. And then at 2 o'clock, I've got the second baseman of the Kansas City Royals, who just texted me now and said, I gotta be out at 2:30 because I got workouts at 3, which is really exciting to hear about too. Thanks to my sponsors, as always, Casey Cattle Company. They're up in Weston, Missouri, veteran-owned and operated. Wagyu beef, they deliver to all 50 states. Get those orders in for the 4th of July now. And tomorrow, if you're in Johnson County here in Kansas City, Overland Park, JJ's Wine and Spirits, you can check them out on Facebook. I want to get to my guest right away. He's over on the other side of the state. Well, technically, I'm just on the other side of the border in Kansas, but I think everybody understands what that means. And I'm happy right now to be joined by John Ruhlin, the co-founder of Giftology. And this is a man that specializes in the art of gift giving. And this isn't just, hey, we got a cool thing for. I mean, there is a lot of thought that goes into this, a lot of psychology, a lot of keys, I know, John, that go into making people more successful in their business. But first and foremost, like everyone else, you spend a lot of time at home. You've got a young family, a house full of kids. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I feel better than I deserve. I'm blessed and fortunate, and a lot of even in the midst of challenges, there's a lot of silver linings. So I feel really, really fortunate.
I wanted to have you on. I wanted to visit with you by phone because you and I met, and I know that you've posted on this. I've posted on this at this amazing virtual gratitude dinner, which I was lucky enough to be included in from a now mutual friend, John Hall, who's right in the middle of us, in the middle part of the state in Columbia, and it was the coolest thing to meet all these people, not just because they were successful, but because I think they all understood gratitude and the importance of giving to others. But you specialize in that. How did you come up with Giftology? And I know you've got the book. You've had so much success with the company, with speaking around the world. How and when was this idea hatched?
Yeah, well, like a lot of ideas, right now we're in a valley or in challenging times, and most of the time, like you look at like an Airbnb or a lot of companies came out of the 2008, 2009 downturn out of necessity. Uber was started then, and so mine was, I grew up on a farm in the middle of Nowheresville, Ohio, poor. Now we weren't poor that we didn't have enough food, but we were definitely like, one of 6 kids, 47-acre farm. We heat our house with wood. We were lower middle income, and I didn't like baling hay every day or milking goats every day, or not, like we were getting hand-me-downs versus going out and having like British Knights or Air Jordans. And so, like when you're hungry and motivated, like you go do something. And so I was going to go be a doctor. Honestly, I was going to go be a chiropractor or a DO to make money because I got good grades. I was wanting to do that, and my life changed because of a mentor. I went and was dating a girl, and her dad was an attorney, and he was a rainmaker, and he was also radically generous. And so I went and interned with a company called Cutco, the knife company, out of desperation to pay for med school. And so I pitched my girlfriend's dad, which is a very awkward conversation. I pitched him knives because he's always giving things away. All of his clients are CEOs of companies, banks, oil wells, insurance companies, financial advisor firms. And I thought maybe all of it, since they're into hunting and fishing, he'll have mercy on me and order like 100 pocket knives that are like, they're not like, ones from China. These are like handmade, Cutco's handmade in New York. They're like $100 pocket knives. And he changed my life forever. He's like, John, I don't want to order pocket knives, got to order 100 paring knives. I'm like, you want to give a bunch of dudes like CEOs of big companies like a kitchen tool. I'm like, why? And he said, John, one of the things I've learned in 40 years in business, the reason I have more referrals and access and deal flow, and I'm the most top of mind person in these communities, is that I figured out if you take care of the family in business, everything else takes care of itself. And so it was like this epiphany for me. Paul like taught me that like how to understand the psychology of relationship building. And most people, like nobody gives two rips about gifts or gratitude in most business scenarios, but everybody cares about relationships and referrals and deal flow and getting the extra phone call to be brought into an investment. And Paul was a magician at this, not as a tactical thing. It was just how he lived his life. And so I'm like, Paul's 60, I'm 20 at the time. I want to be Paul someday, 40 years from now. So I just mimicked it. And I mimicked what I saw in him. And I started to land some of the biggest deals Cutco had ever seen, to the point where Cutco's worked with about 1.5 million distributors in 70 years. And by mimicking these systems around gratitude and gifting and generosity, I became the #1 sales rep in the history of the company out of 5 million, and built a company now that we call Giftology around how to systematize and how to use gifting and gratitude, not for woo-woo like warm fuzzy stuff, but how to actually 10x and 100x your relationships in your business.
Because, and I was telling you this before we started the episode, people remember feelings, right? I mean, this is true for you as a speaker too. Like I know that if I'm doing my job right on stage, people walk out with a feeling that they will remember. And you know, you hope that they're not going to remember every single thing you said in the speech. No. You hope they remember something they can take and use. I mean, that's the goal. But you want them to walk out with a feeling. That's ultimately what you're doing, right? When you send something, or one of your customers sends something to one of their clients, it's, yeah, I'm sure there's a factor, wow, this is cool. But it's also not some cheap, hey, look, here's a pen with our logo on it, or here's some sunglasses. You know, like, I mean, it's meaningful.
Yeah, it's not trinkets. It's not, yeah, most people have confused, in our Western culture, everybody thinks they're a 7 out of 10 when it comes to gifting and gratitude, and really they're a -3 out of 10. And they don't realize that what they're actually sending when they're sending trinkets and crappy stuff from China or stuff with logos on it is they're damaging the relationship. They're actually trying to manipulate and turn their relationships into a billboard for them. And they remember that emotion of like, oh my gosh, like I did $1 million in business with that person and they sent me a box of chocolates with their logo on it. Or they sent me a polo shirt with a logo the size of a softball on it. Like, who's gonna wear that? Nobody. Like, they'll maybe wear it once a year at the golf outing to make you feel good, but the other 364 days, it's like being used to wash your car. And so most people don't understand that, yeah, that emotional anchor, when you're able to make somebody feel an emotion, whether that's your significant other, your kids, your employees, your clients, like we all make decisions based upon a emotional trigger, and then we justify logically. And we don't realize that oftentimes what we're communicating to our most valuable relationships is, you don't matter. Like, I didn't want to take the time to handwrite a note, so I sent you a text, or I typed out a card and mass produced it. Yeah, you did. I didn't want to take the time to go pick out a gift, so here's your gift card, go buy your own gift. Like, if you do that to your wife, like how, on your like 25th anniversary, here's a gift card, go buy your own gift. How does that work out? Not so well. Like, you're not, like, no brownie points. But we do that in business, and we think that we're like checking the box, and we're like, this is our plan, or this is how we're going to build relationships, and we're actually damaging our relationships, and we wonder why we don't get referrals, or why don't people call me when for that opportunity. It's like, well, because you communicated that person was just a number. And so what we're really tapping into is the core of relationships, simple concepts that if you apply consistently over years, the people that are most successful are oftentimes givers. And there is a strategy to it. It's not an accidental thing. And because there are a lot of people that are taken advantage of as givers and are at the worst performance in sales or business as well. So it's being really thoughtful and strategic with how you're building those relationships. And that's what we call giftology.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this leading up to our podcast here, and actually thought about it when I met you on that virtual dinner, that some of the most memorable conversations and people that I've met since I began my business a few years ago, you don't remember who followed up with an email. We have a million of those. Not everybody is in a position with a company or whatever it is to be able to do what some of your customers are doing, but yet maybe they sent me a thank you note and a handwritten note, which I will never do because I can't read my own writing, let alone somebody else. But I had a guest on my show maybe a little over a year ago, and he's an artist here in Kansas City. He's maybe around 25. His work has been purchased by Elton John and others. He's legally blind. It's a family business, so his mom and dad run it. And I mean, the most stunning, beautiful art that has raised millions of dollars around the world. And so
Wow.
he lost his vision as a kid and fell in love with painting. It's one of the coolest stories that I've done. And he has some challenges. So we did the interview with him and his mom and his dad. He's a great kid. And, so he has these thank you cards that are all just beautifully designed, with his designs on them. And so he sends and he physically writes this letter. I'll never forget it. I just won't. And so I think that there's some of that psychology of what you're talking there. It's not like it was something that was useful for me in terms of a gift that I could, put into use, but yet that emotion and feeling to this day from this kid, Jeff Hansen and Jeff Hansen Art is still there. It'll stay with me forever.
Yeah, well, I tell people all the time, like people are like, oh, John, you're just advocating to send out Rolexes and $20,000 gifts to people. I'm like, the handwritten note is actually more important than what you're giving. Like most affluent people, I don't care if you're in pro sports or financial services or manufacturing, like we don't need more stuff. Like we're drowning in stuff, but we all have room for an artifact. And so we tell people like, maybe it's a over the top, amazing piece of artwork. Like we do these crazy $1,000 mugs called artifact mugs. And people are like $1,000 for a mug. And I'm like, I have billionaires that have written back to us and said the mug was more valuable than their $50,000 watch. Why? Well, carved into this mug over 4 weeks is somebody's whole life story. And at a core level, we all want to be treated like a human. We all want to be seen and acknowledged and feel like our life has mattered. And so when somebody who would have an easy reason to give up takes the time to not only jump on your show, but to write you a note, like they're communicating something, a deep emotional connection. And so that's why when people are like, John, we want to hire your agency to do our gifts, don't do the handwritten notes. I'm like, if you're not willing to let us or work with you to do the personalized handwritten notes, then you might as well not even send the gift. Otherwise, you're just automating stuff on Amazon or whatever else, and stuff showing up doesn't matter. But an artifact, an emotion, a connection, a human-to-human relationship that takes place, I don't care if you're a billionaire, I don't care who you are, or you're a janitor, we all crave as human beings. That's how God's wired us, whether you believe in a God or not. Like, it's human beings. We crave to be acknowledged. We crave to matter. We crave that human-to-human connection. And so it's simple things that they keep in 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. It's like kings of countries would give other kings, like in the Old Testament, you'd see people give 10,000 head of cattle. Why? Because they realized that when you give a gift to somebody else, the value of the relationship is what the gift signifies. They could go get their own 10,000 head of cattle, but the fact that you're honoring and respecting somebody as another human being or as another leader or as an employee, that kind of stuff sticks in our psyche, it sticks in our heart, it sticks in our soul. And so it sounds woo-woo, but it's like a lot of the things that we teach, like Proverbs 18:16 is from the Old Testament. A gift ushers you before kings. So the stuff I'm teaching to startup companies, to companies like Google, are things that have been around for 5,000 or 10,000 years that we've forgotten about. And so I love your artist story. I love to work with people that understand that the little things, the handcrafted things, the blood, sweat, and tears poured into something is part of the story, and it's part of why it impacts somebody in such a profound way.
Yeah, and you don't forget it. And I know that I'm actually going to shift over to your website to show a couple things in a moment, but just for the sake of anyone that hasn't seen it, this is Jeff Hansen Art, and The kid's amazing. They've been featured on CBS Sunday Morning, and so
Ah,
when you start
one of
thinking,
my favorite shows. That's one of my
well,
favorite shows.
well,
Uh,
that's a by the way, that is a staple in the Goldberg house.
my wife called it old man show when I started watching it. I grew up watching it with my grandparents, and now she's more in love with it than I am. We watch it
Yeah,
every Sunday morning with our kids. It's like, yeah, you want to talk about like a top 25 stage or show to be on. Like my grandparents aren't living anymore, but I know they're looking down. Like I want to be on CBS Sunday Morning someday because like the positive stories that get shared on that show are like some of my most favorite. I haven't seen the Jeff Hansen episode. I'll have to go look it up.
yeah. I'll send you the link to it. It's that was before I got to him, and then we were introduced by the good old networking game, and just amazing. That right there, I said the name and you got an emotion. Same thing for me. That's why that show is one of a kind because, and I took about 1 week off. I shouldn't say I took a week off, but the first week when this pandemic started, they didn't quite have their A game because they were adjusting like everyone else. It didn't work. It didn't flow, and they got it figured out within like a week, and now it's
They
back to normal.
did. It's
I
back
love
good,
it.
yeah. Well, at some level, that all they wanted to cover that first week was
Yeah,
it wasn't the positive angles, and nobody was in person. It was weird.
it was weird.
It didn't feel it didn't have the same uplifting feeling. So, and all they covered was negative COVID stuff. I'm like, come on, guys, like
Yeah, that's not who you are.
that's not who you are. Like, let's get your yeah. So
So that leads me to a question. I mean, you're in the people business. We all are almost all of us to some extent.
yeah,
For me, being in I always say people say, oh, you get paid to talk about baseball and meet all these guys. I'm in the people business. I'm in the business of bringing that to others, bringing everybody together. I obviously can't do that right now. I've pivoted to doing these type of things. That'll continue, but how has this pandemic changed your business? Because yours is different. I mean, people still want that connectivity. So how has it affected giftology?
yeah. Well, I mean, we speak 20 times a year on some big stages. We've spoken at Google a couple times. We just did a big event in Australia back in February before everything hit, like for Volkswagen and some other places like that. So a lot of I was supposed to speak at Warren Buffett's annual meeting and some of those kind of places that got pushed to 2021. So that was disappointing. But I realized I try to ask myself, like, what's the gift? Ironically, in anything, like there's always a silver lining. There's always an angle. There's always a pivot point. The word pivot to me is a little bit overused, but you can shift your thinking and say, what's the gift in this? And for me, like even though I only spoke 20 times a year, I was still away from my family. And I got 4 young girls at home that want to see me. So I've been at home with my family more than ever. I'm in the best shape of my life because I took control of things. And I'm like, if I'm not on the road, I have no excuse not to go to, work out with somebody, whether it's virtually or in person. And I can't say, well, I'm at the client dinner and the wine and the bread and whatever else. I'm like, so I buckled down and took my health to another level, and I feel strong. And on the business side, I realized like, hey, if everybody's canceling all their in-person biz dev opportunities, dinners, golf round, all the in-person stuff, conferences, people still crave to be seen and acknowledged and top of mind. And to me, my original mentor, Paul, his term was, he's a country boy. He's like, hey, the extra scoop of ice cream means the most, on a bad day. And that's his way of saying, like, when you're in the valley, you find out who has your back. When your back's backed into a corner, you find out who really, there's a lot of lip service out there of, oh, I got your back. But you find out when the chips are down, who really has that. And so we actually realized, like, hey, this is our opportunity to shine. So we increased our own personal gifting budget. And our top clients, in some cases, doubled their gifting budget because they're like, hey, we need to go out and show people that we still love them, that when you show up powerfully to people, when everybody else is pulling back, you actually can gain market share. You can actually stand out even more because now it's crickets and you start sending love bombs to people. So I actually will probably speak 200% more than I ever have in a year because I can do it virtually now. And almost every CEO group I'm speaking to wants something tangible and real. So before I speak, we send out to every CEO, every client, every employee a love bomb that we execute for them. And so now they come to the gathering, the virtual conference, the whatever, and they've experienced what it's like to have this surprise and delight show up at their house. And we're actually converting more people on the back end into becoming clients to the agency side. because people actually have a firsthand tangible experience of what we're talking about when you talk about sending a artifact or a love bomb or a mug or these silly knives or whatever they are. And people are like the amount of attendance showing up to these Zooms, people are Zoom fatigued, but a freaking love bomb shows up to your house a week before the event, you show up because you're curious. And so we realize that there's angles and there's opportunities, through these challenges to actually have more impact, and have more impact at home because I don't have to be on the road. So it's been a blessing for us in many ways.
So when one receives a love bomb, what do they receive?
So they could be like right now, because everybody's at home, not going to restaurants as much, they're cooking at home probably 30 times more than they ever have. And you look at Home Depot and a lot of these organizations that are in the home improvement business, or like I have clients in the patio business, in the patio furniture, they're up 200-300% because everybody's at home. So we do things like, it might be a customized knife set. People are like, who cares about knives? And I'm like, if you're cooking 3 meals a day for your family and you have sucky appliances at home or sucky knives, and something shows up that's engraved with your family name, your spouse's name, with a handwritten note saying, hey, thanks so much for carving out the time to be with us, or carve out some time and join this event, and you'll learn how to build relationships from afar. So we do a lot with, to this day, people are like, what's the hot new sexy gift? I'm like, the stupid knives. They're like, that was like 20 years ago in college. I'm like, people still eat, people are still married, the hub of the house is still the kitchen. And when most people have a $50 set from Walmart of knives, and I send them one knife that costs $200 that was handmade with their name carved into the blade and their wife's name or husband's name, it sounds weird, but that shows up to somebody out of the blue from one human to another with a handwritten note as this surprise and delight. And we've literally, like our pro sports clients, we have 25 pro sports teams that we worked with. 80% of them have used the knives because it's like, do you want another, a 4th or a 40th signed baseball or a jersey that you don't have room for? Or would you rather have something that you can go use with your family, for the next 40 years? And so tapping into people's humanity is a lot of what we walk people through is, hey, they're a human being, they have a significant other, they have a family. What's universal? Well, eating and breaking bread, even, like in 2020, is still something that's core to who we are. So we try to tap into those core things and then build around the details to make it land in such a way that makes somebody feel, special and acknowledged.
Makes so much sense, yet is so often forgotten. I mentioned that I wanted to show your website because I just, the numbers up on here are fascinating. 42% of companies give to customers or prospects. That's it. That's a lot of people missing on it. 68% of gifts have logos on it. It feels like 90% to me. 54% of gifts will be food or beverage. And then I like this one too. I mean, so many of us are guilty on this one. Stop sucking at strategic gifting and stop making the same mistakes. Only gifting ABC, anniversaries, birthday, and Christmas.
Timing's massive. It's as important as what you're sending. And I tell people, like, if your wife or husband, if you only do gifts on anniversaries and Valentine's Day and Christmas, those are table stakes. Like, you're not getting any brownie points for like doing something on an anniversary. But if you start showing up for your significant other on random Tuesdays saying, hey, I was thinking of you, babe, like, and you handwrite a note and send something, oftentimes people are like, what's wrong? Like, did you screw up? Like, what are you not telling me? Because it's so out of the ordinary. And so the timing, like most people only do gifts after a deal's done or after a referral's given. And I always ask them, like, are you in the relationship business or the transaction business? And I don't care if you sell toilet paper, people are like, we're all about relationships. And I'm like, well, if you get $1 million referral and you send somebody a $500 bottle of wine, what did you just turn that relationship into? A transaction, a tit for tat. That doesn't work. But when you love on people as a just because, and you start sending things to people, I tell people all the time, like, tell me all of the most important relationships you have: vendors, media, investors, mentors, clients, referral sources. Build out that list, and we call it planned randomness. 2 to 4 times a year, send things out to people with no agenda, no manipulation. I'm sending this to you just because I was thinking of you. And when you can do that, whether it's to one person or to 10,000 people, people will be like, I didn't refer you anything. I didn't do a deal with you. Like, why? It's not my birthday. Why are you sending this? And you're like, just because. And they're like, are you like crazy? And so when we walk people through that methodology of switching up the timing, that one detail can completely transform how something's received. I can send the same knife set to 10 people or 10,000 people, and based upon the timing of it and all the little details around it, they feel like they're the only ones that received it. And they're like, if everybody was really good at gifting, it would be noise. But because people suck at it so bad, when these things show up, people are like, it just melts their face off. They don't know how to respond to it because it's so out of the ordinary of our transactional society.
Kiana Sig says, yes, when you love on people, this is so good. And just because I need to start this, certainly, and again, it doesn't have to be a $10,000 gift. It's whatever you can do, but it's the thought process. How many of us, myself included, fail at that on a regular basis just because we're not thinking along those lines. It's great advice. My baseball themed questions for you.
Yes.
I assume you're a Cardinals fan. Well, but you grew up in Ohio, though.
I at a core level, Northeastern Ohio sports teams and Ohio State Buckeyes are like my teams. But I've lived in St. Louis for 10 years, and I respect the mass hysteria that people have in St. Louis around their Blues and around their Cardinals. And so I do root for the Cardinals. Ironically enough, I've talked to DeWitt and the family there about doing gifting, and we do a ton of gifting at a super high level for the Cubs. And I talked to the Cardinals first, and they turned me down. So ironically enough, the city I live in, I do work with the Blues, but I've never done anything with the Cardinals. And I'm like, Phil, come on, man. We for the Cubs, we took their 100-year-old Wrigley Field locker room wood and turned it into 500 Bluetooth speakers made from this 100-year-old wood. And even, the billionaire Ricketts family was like, this is amazing. And I'm like, we can do the same thing or even better in your backyard. But yeah, I root for the Cardinals. I root for the Blues, just being, them local right now. But the Indians, and when the Cavs won, LeBron brought a championship home. I cried with my brothers on Father's Day when they won that game. So I'm an Ohio boy at heart.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I mean, just on a personal level, right here again are the emotions. You mentioned Cleveland, and it brings emotions to me because as a guy that's traveled with the Royals for the last 12 years, I've spent, 120, 130 nights in Cleveland. And, people have their perceptions of certain towns. You spend enough time anywhere, you get to know the people, you fall in love with it. And so, we won't travel this year from a broadcast standpoint. I can't wait to get back to Cleveland and places like that next year where you've built relationships with the hotel staff and the vendors and the ushers and all of that. So now, baseball-themed questions. What's the biggest home run that you have hit professionally?
The biggest home run I've hit professionally, I would say, I think the success of the Giftology book and seeing that get go global and start to get the rights bought up in Korea and other countries, and seeing people responding. I've gotten letters from people in Vietnam saying my marriage is better by applying this business book. Wow. The principles are. So I think seeing the impact of that book go to places I could never go, and the ripple effect of how that's helped people is probably my biggest.
To me, the more interesting question is, not that wasn't interesting, or more interesting answer is the swing and miss. Because the good ones, like yourself, and everybody says the greatest things about you, John, as a person, by the way, which is the most important to me. But, we recognize our failures, we learn from them. So what's the biggest swing and miss you've taken, and what have you learned from it?
I would say, I have plenty of them. I swing and miss every day because I oftentimes do go for the home runs and go for the fences. I think probably not taking enough time at home early on in my marriage with little ones at home, and not having anything left in the gas tank for my wife and for my kids early on in my marriage. I almost lost my business about 13 years ago, went bankrupt. And so I started off already rocky going into the marriage with from a confidence perspective. And so I basically just put my head down and was consumed. And even to this day, there's ripple effects and wounds that my wife has as a direct result of making my business my mistress, my wife, versus home. And it's something that you can't necessarily go back and change. You can make different decisions going forward. But that's been probably if I had a regret or something I wish I could change, that would be it.
And then the last baseball themed question is my favorite one, which is small ball, the little things, the bunts, the singles, the things that got Kenny Lofton on base when you were growing up and watching him, right?
Yeah.
Guys like those some good Indians teams too. The little things that add up to the big things. It's been interesting in asking this question to so many guests, and a little hint here, I'm writing a book on this topic, but the handwritten note has been not common, but I've heard a few of those. So that there have been some answers in that world, in your world. There have been others that have been something as interesting as having a face-to-face cup of coffee and getting to know someone. It's been really fascinating to get people's different takes on this, but we all want to hit the home run. In this day and age of baseball, there are a lot of guys swinging for the home run, but as well as I do, it's everything you've talked about over these last 20 minutes that add up to the big home run. You're a walking success story on that. What is small ball to you?
I mean, small ball to me is consistently showing up day in and day out. Everybody says they play the long game, but most people's long game is days, not decades. And so what I would say is that being careful about who you surround yourself with, that's what rubs off. That's who you become. And taking the time to sharpen the axe and do the little things and take care of your body and your mind and reading and having kind of daily habits that over time compound. Darren Hardy wrote the book Compound Effect, and it's all of those little things. It is the handwritten note. It's the extra phone call. It's the follow-up extra question to find out where, what's really going on in somebody's life or where they vacation, to be able to tie back into that. It's the chance relationship of helping somebody when they're lower on the totem pole succeed, and then not realizing a decade later they're in a position to actually be higher than you to pull you up. And so I think in general, I would sum it up in all things, give more than is reasonable, which is what my mentor kind of lived by. He didn't say it; it's just how he lived. And I would say if you can do those little things of giving more strategically in those little areas, personally and professionally, it does start to stack the deck. And as another mentor of mine would say, Tom Hill, who's from St. Louis area, put the odds in your favor. We can't control the outcomes, but there are things that we can do consistently in our health, in our relationships, in our business that put the odds to succeed, put them in favor of us succeeding. If we do that consistently in all areas of life over time, a lot of good things are probably going to happen.
I met Tom, I was going to say a few months ago. I didn't meet him sometime before all this began. I met him maybe last fall or early winter here at an event, which was really cool. He even put me in his weekly newsletter, so I was excited to get
awesome.
him there. Yeah,
the E-zine, the Eagle Zine.
Yeah, the Eagle Zine. So that was cool, and I've come to understand the influence that he has on so many. 4 final quick questions. These are rounding the bases, fun type of deals. You have multiple times during this interview and before we got on referenced the importance of reading. So this is always a tough question, but do you have that one book or those 2 books that have been the biggest influence?
Yeah, well, I'm a person of faith, so I mean that's the easy go-to cliche answer. Like I think that all wisdom is God's wisdom, but I think that having a strong faith is really, really powerful. I would say I learned a lot from John Maxwell early on, and as a young man trying to figure out business and leadership and whatever else. But I'd say within the last decade that's been most impactful. The book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, really influenced me in an enormous way. It really shifted a lot of my thinking around giftology and how to there's givers, takers, and matchers, and how to understand all of them and how to be a giver and succeed has been really, really powerful.
Second question as we round the bases, you talked about working with a Google, also working with a startup, 2 totally different worlds there. How do you compare being on both ends of that? Because I'm sure that they both bring you equal amount of joy and purpose.
Yeah. Well, I like working with, if I ever start a podcast, it's going to be around the David and Goliath theme, because I like the underdog. I think most people resonate and love seeing the underdog win in sports. They love seeing the underdog win in business. And I think most people, are not publicly traded companies. They're small, mid-sized companies that are privately funded with their oftentimes the founder, owner, or family's money. And so I love working with smaller companies because they have, instead of $100 million budget, they might have $1 million budget, or instead of a $100,000 budget, they might have a $10,000 budget. So I love working with people that their own skin is on the line and it's their relationships. But it's fun to work with the big companies. It's fun to work with the Cubs and the Spurs and these different organizations. But in general, I love working with somebody who really believes in what we're doing at a core level. It's not a tactic. It's a heart set and a mindset of using generosity as this competitive advantage. And so while it's fun to have the big logos of companies, the core of our business is really built on small and mid-sized companies and even solopreneurs that it's a big deal for them to invest $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million versus the company who's like, oh yeah, I guess we should probably do something. Yeah, it's a rounding error in our marketing or biz dev budget. Like that to me isn't as gratifying because the core belief isn't necessarily there.
It's interesting, and I know it's great to live in both of those worlds. I think that those startups and those with the smaller budgets, they take you back to your roots and remind you of how hard you worked, and at least for me, I see it with young broadcasters. You see yourself in them, and you wanna do the best that you can to help them along the way get to where they might one day. All right, two final that are left as we round the bases. The third question. You've been in front of a lot of audiences. I mean, for you to jump in front of Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, that's your life, traveling around the world and doing that. Was there a point where you went from, okay, this is the next speech, or from, oh my gosh, I'm doing this, to, hey, this is business, or do you still have some of that?
Oh, I still have jitters. What's ironic is I hated speaking and avoided it like the plague for a decade. I would have diarrhea and indigestion for 6 months leading up to any speaking engagement.
6 months.
Like literally, like my stomach would be in knots anytime I thought about the talk. And I would have to lock myself in a hotel room for 24 to 48 hours beforehand to rewrite and stew on it. And so I really feel like it's a God-given calling to do what I do now because I still get jitters. I still get nervous before I get on stage. I still can't believe I'm doing it. And so and probably because I don't do it 100 or 200 times a year. I do it 20 times a year or 30 times a year. Like that's different, but I'm still pinch myself when I'm on a big stage or small stage. I don't take it for granted. And there's an element of like humor that God has a sixth sense of humor that like you take the thing that you hated and avoided and now is like one of your callings. It's also, I think at some level, my wife would maybe disagree, but it keeps me relatively humble because I realize like this is like, I still have that fear. I'm able to use that energy positively and use it as fuel, but it's still something that to this day, I still get jitters. It's almost like a championship ball game. I love basketball and it's like a championship game. Like I got jitters. I'm like ready. I have my routine I go through in the morning and all that before I speak.
I tell you what, I'm not a huge NBA fan. I was growing up in Philadelphia and Chicago, and it's been so long since I've lived in an NBA city, but I'm so excited to see the NBA come back next month. It's going to be really intriguing to see how that one goes. My walk-off question, and we'll wrap it up then. You have been involved with giving many, 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 many gifts. What's the best gift you've ever received?
Great question. I would say it's probably multifaceted. So I'll give you my original mentor, Paul, who I learned a lot of this from, gave me the gift of like shifting my mindset around relationships and literally bought those 100 paring knives from Cutco and then gave them to me and said, hey, go meet this CEO of this lumber yard and tell him that Paul thinks you should have one of these, whether you buy or not. So he transferred social capital and belief and a whole like operating system. I would say that my wife on Father's Day, when the Cavs won that championship, surprised me with a breakfast with 30 of my closest friends back in Ohio, and then got me the Air Jordans I wanted when I was 16, the original pair, that were like crazy, stupid money, boxed up, and then had custom jerseys made for her and our three girls at the time to go play basketball with my closest buddies that I didn't know were even around. And then we watched the Cavs win the championship on Father's Day. So as far as a gift that has melted my face off, my wife, who hates surprises, by the way, kept the surprise and executed all the details on that for me. And I'm a horrible person to try to buy a gift for, because I'm analyzing every detail, and she just knocked it out of the ballpark.
That's pretty cool. You'll never forget it, obviously. And
no.
And so she figured it out. I mean, she knows you better than everyone, obviously. So she knew she had to hit it big on that one. Obviously, she did. Well, people can reach John. He's had the email up there on the screen, so you could certainly, if you're interested in anything giftology related, go that route. Here's the website. The book is on Amazon and all over the place. And so certainly for any of the company's executives, or individuals for that matter, that are out there that are watching that need some inspiration. I mean, there was so much, John, in this conversation here that we could learn just from the thought process behind that, the psychology, and the importance, especially at a time like right now, of helping others out. So, John, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man, even when you're not traveling like you are. Continued success, continue making an impact in people's lives. That's what I have learned about you in the short time that I've known you. And most importantly, as I said too, I know that you're good to people, and obviously a great family man. And at some point, I'll get to St. Louis, and when you're being slightly less healthy, I'll buy you a beer.
I'd love a good beer. I can't wait to hit my goal to be able to enjoy. I told my wife I'm not watching The Last Dance until I hit my goal, and I'm not having a bourbon or a beer, any sort of alcohol. So I probably got another month or two before I hit my goal. But at that point, I would love to break bread with you. That'd be great.
That sounds good. The bourbon, you got my attention there. Last Dance will be worth your while when you get to it. It'll be the most amazing reward that you have had for sure. John, thanks for taking the time. Best of continued luck and health to you and your family.
Thanks, Joel. It's been awesome. I appreciate it.
All right, John Ruhlin of Giftology. What an amazing guest and an amazing guy, what he is able to do. A quick reminder, triple header today. Pastor Armour D. Stevenson III, Pastor AD3, has had the most compelling show and presentation about what is going on in the world of racial injustice that I've heard anywhere, period. I happened to be sent a sermon that he did, a Q&A with another pastor. I sat there in bed one night and I said, oh my gosh, I understand this better now because of this man that I don't know. So I started putting in some messages and tracked him down. I've never met him before, and he's going to be on my show at noon. And then one of the greatest guys in baseball right now, young second baseman for the Kansas City Royals, Nicky Lopez, at 2. These are all people that just specialize in the importance of taking care of others. Thanks to my sponsors, as always, Casey Cattle Company, JJ's Wine and Spirits, and Enterprise Bank and Trust, #No Stopping You. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you'll share it with your network, and catch you soon, or hopefully later today. Bye.